very strong place in society, especially as a point of verification.
Yes.
Okay, and I want to now bring in Alex Gakuru, who's joining us via telephone, and he is from Technology Rights and Defender Director, Code IP Trust. And Alex Gakuru, thank you for joining us this morning. But just to get your opening remarks in regards to, you know, technology and whether you feel possibly whether it has disrupted or maybe changed the way we do things in the newsroom. Alex.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on phone. In a headline sense, I differ and say that technology actually has revolutionized information and communication sphere in general. And so information communication is just a subset. There is infotainment, there is entertainment, education, all of them have been disrupted. And as with all revolutions, there are new models that emerge with new winners and new losers. So what I feel it has done, as evidenced by data, is the growth of online presence and the shifting audiences to online platforms in and of itself proves that this disruption has come. And I think what people need to do is to realize that and embrace it and then start figuring out how to deal with the new disruption so that then be winners in the new scenario.
Okay, and what do you see? What would your advice be now in terms of how we take this information from those different platforms and how we use it? Because just like Caro has mentioned, the place of legacy media still remains by virtue of the fact that we verify. We may have the knowledge and the ethics to follow up on some of the stories. What advice would you give to the newsroom in regards to using and percolating this information?
I think the role of traditional media practice is now more important than ever. What we are only talking about is the accessing and dissemination. But when something is new, when we have new cars, it doesn't mean some new mode of transportation. It doesn't mean we'll get to our destination faster or safer. It therefore calls for new pilots, new drivers, or new steers of the new media. But since it's a question of people moving from point A to point B, from where they do not know something to where they know, then we need the drivers who are now the practitioners in the traditional media to steer this journey, because if it's left on its own, this whole vehicle could go amok.
Okay. Let me come to you, Sarah. And one of the challenges that we also have now when it comes to these social media platforms is the regulation of it, because it's almost difficult to tell who owns it, and anybody can say anything, even in terms of, let's say, when we have elections, especially in a country like Kenya, where we are very ethnically inclined. It can be a platform for chaos. How do we, harness that and ensure that we actually use it for the good and not the worst of the country?
I think the problem with digital is the freedom, and with freedom comes fake news, right? Because what I report as Sarah may probably, it's not the truth of the matter.
As much as it might be truth to Sarah.
Yes, but it's not the truth of the matter. And the reason we still go to watch news is to go and confirm what Sarah said on Twitter, whether it was true. Now, the problem of how we use social media is if you go to Twitter, you see something trending, and you believe it to be true. Why? Because you're like, if everyone is talking about it, it must be true. And I think then the onus is on journalists, because we've seen instances where they come back and they say, oh, we were wrong, now we are right. So what does that happen? The consumer then is not able to trust fully what is said on social media, even by a media house, because they feel it could be, maybe tomorrow they'll recant it, tomorrow they'll say it was wrong. But you see, platforms have done a lot of work. Facebook has done a lot of work in trying to kick out fake news. Correct. Twitter tried to block and, people who share information that is either politically charged or sexually charged. However, it's not that easy because it's not real time. So a consumer will go on Twitter today, tweet something. By the time we report that person enough for the platform to take action, the message has gone, right? And you can't take it back. So what happens, I'm sure you've seen consumers who actually come back and say, this was not the truth, I want to take it back. But then that tweet or that Facebook message has 4 views vis-a-vis the first message that could have 100 or 1,000 messages. So it's almost, it's a social responsibility space where as you tweet or as you send the message out, you as a person, how do you imagine this message is going to inform other people? I'm sure, we've seen fights, physical or otherwise, that have happened because of fake information.
Correct.
And the consumer did not take the 1 minute to just verify that information. So yes, digital is here, but as people who have mobile phones, how are we going to actually police ourselves? Because, no one is going to police Twitter as much, or Facebook.
And there's only so much that they can do anyway, because like you mentioned, that by the time they even do the little that they can do, information is already out there. Sometimes the damage is already done. Caro, how do you, because you're in that space, how do you navigate that space and ensure that, one, you're on time? Because the other thing that social media has done is made things happen very fast. Previously, we may have had the privilege of time to go and verify. By the time you're putting it on the newspaper or reporting it on the news, it is something that is already, you've done the homework. But now we are in a world that really wants things done fast. How do you navigate that space?
Yes, I think that we've had to step back and ask ourselves as a media house, of course, as standard. Is it fast or are we accurate? So for me, accuracy is very, very important. And that's where the role of fact-checking comes in, that when we get a report, we call the KTN news reporter on ground, we call the court reporter from the newspaper in court and confirm. Because yes, a lot of fake news, even alerts come through WhatsApp groups. Like Sarah will tell you, she's in the media buying space. WhatsApp is the most popular form of sharing platform in Kenya, if not in Africa. So you get something, you're in a group with very, very influential people, so to speak, or people you think are credible people.
Correct.
They send out a document, like there was a building bridges information document that was sent in a WhatsApp group I was in, only for the person to say that he was not sure whether that document was true or not. One of the media houses used the report and had to recant that information because they had not verified from the Building Bridges Initiative. And this is a group that you think that all the members are credible. But you can see if it is that close home, what does it mean? So it means as media houses or news outlets, it means being fast is no longer important. It means that you have to be fast, I mean factual and accurate. Even if it means 30 minutes later, you'd rather get it right because the audience never forgets. They always take screenshots and 50 years after, Kofefe is circulating.
And let's face it, keyboard warriors can be very brutal, and normally they spread the news very fast. Let me bring in Alex on this. And Alex, I know that technology is a fantastic thing. Are there tools that one can look at and ensure that you use to filter fake news? Because fake news has also become a huge business. I mean, let's face it, there are those who literally make money out of fake news. So Alex, are there tools that one can use to ensure that, first of all, before you spread any rumors or anything that may be untrue, that you fact-checked?
There are none. I'm sorry, there are none. The bearer of the bad news. And fake news, although it's not new, it got prominence more recently. But if you think about it, we have always had untruths. We have had alternative facts. We have had a lie. They have come in different names, and they have existed even before what we are calling traditional media, means of communication, were invented. Regulating speech in and of itself, regardless of the medium, is a very complicated thing because you start now dwelling on truth. And again, a question of whose truth are you referring to? Because my truth may not be your truth. So trying to leave such an important decision to technology, a tool made by man to be automating that, risks expression, and I think I would not even recommend piloting one if it existed. But I think what we need to look at is mechanisms of correcting something if it's been found to be untruth, if it's online. And this could take the different forms. I think the last and most popular, the one we least desire, is whether it's legal. But let me give you an example of a social self-regulation mechanism that I find. Now, that is yesterday's Guardian newspaper, an article on the on Macron's the view of the they call the Yellow Jacket, published as an opinion, as an editorial yesterday. It was published on SAD, and then they published everything. It was all good, but then by yesterday, they had corrected it, saying that they had cited a number of 170,000 demonstrators on the streets of Paris, but they realized that was estimated number for the whole country, and for that they apologized and been corrected. What I wonder is, based on maybe our more local focused news sources, how many of them take the time to quickly correct something that was wrong, to win public trust that, you know what, everybody makes a mistake. So even if they made a mistake, how fast are they at correcting and owning up to it? And I think it's human, as more there should be social, and then there should be self-regulation. But then self-regulation must not be a branding exercise. It must be a felt experience. That's what I would say. And when somebody makes a mistake, I think it's only fair to say, hey, there's a mistake I made, they have corrected it, and life goes on, other than making it complicated.
All right. And Sarah, maybe speaking to those who may be watching in terms of the responsibility that we need to take up, because there are instances where just peddling lies can literally be a matter of life and death. And we need to have some internal way of ensuring that we do not become that platform that peddles lies and eventually either becomes disastrous.
You know, I think in the hunger and the chase for numbers, views, impressions, selling a newspaper, we've become people who really don't think about the impact of the stories we say. So if you look at the online, you know, most blogs, what they post is, you know, some of them is quite detrimental to people, but the person sending the blog post will never think of the other person before sending the story. And because we have no digital law or way of governing how digital works. No, you know, as an example, Magufuli is, you know, I don't know if it's a good example, but Tanzania actually have a digital law that ensures you don't post neither on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, or on a blog, something that actually could be harmful to the other person. And they've actually been able to jail people because of it. However, is it the right way? Really? Maybe not. Because I believe if as humans who are citizen journalists or even media journalists who are able to govern ourselves, you know, just self-governance, then that information will not be able to get out. And what happens is information comes from a blog post maybe or a tweet. A newspaper or a news house picks it up, wants to be the first to publish it, don't check first. And by the time the damage is already done, you know, and when the apology comes, of course, comes in page 27, but the story was on page 1
or page 2.
And the damage is done, you know. Sometimes the example of an accident, you could be sitting at home and you see your mother dead on a roadside in somewhere in Kakamega, and you are not aware, you know, that has happened. Has not even been informed. Yes. Yeah. Why? Because I want to be the first to share this information. So self-governance is very important, but the problem is information is so, we are thirsty for information, and therefore, am I sure in the next few years we are going to see self-governance? Maybe not. If you see in the US, you know, Trump is always shouting fake news, but the information goes out because every other person wants to be the first to say that information, whether it's true or not true.
All right. Carol, to imagine or expect there to be regulation, of course, would be pushing it, mainly because how does the government even regulate? It's literally a free platform. But self-regulation then would obviously be something that would be needed. But the question is, are we, especially now if we look at the Kenyan space, are we, our value system, is it enough to govern us and ensure that what we put out there, one, does not put anybody at risk. Secondly, like she's mentioned, like Sarah's mentioned, there are things that maybe are sensitive. You may have next of kin who's not been informed, yet there you are publishing pictures of dead bodies of possibly people their relatives don't even know. There needs to be some kind of self-regulation.
You know, these are not platforms we own. These are Facebook, this is Twitter. And one of the recent conversations that have been coming up, especially in the US, is, remember this, even Google shows you what you like to read. And what that has meant, it has made us very polarized. And we saw that during the election. So if I like to follow political party X or politician Y, I am the algorithm ensures that I just see that kind of information. What does that do to me? It makes me very narrow. And now coming back to the view, to the values, because I have been exposed to one side of things, when Sarah shares another side of things, it offends me. It's because I've not been exposed to everything.
To the other side.
And you know, we need to step back and as publishers ask ourselves, are these data, you know, information of things, algorithms, in the long run, will it be to our good? Even for advertisers, you know, she'll want to expose her advert to a 25-year-old, she is in her first job. But, you know, if you look at it in the long term, even in the form of information, if I expose this person to only one way of thinking, what does it do to the person? And what does that mean to my values? Because my values are set, I become extremist. Because this is the only way, this is the right way, it's very skewed. And that's a conversation we need to have going forward. That, yes, we have stopped saying mass media, we are now fragmenting and fragmenting the audience, fragmenting the information, fragmenting the advertising. So what does it mean if I have a new product or have a new way of thinking? Will that person listen? And that's where, if you're talking about disruption, I think for me, that's where it is. That we need to really think carefully, what are we doing to ourselves? Yeah, because right now on my feed, I am now seeing a lot of news about Bush and his dog, because I have been following the death of Bush Sr.
Right.
But it's because there's a bot working behind the scenes to expose me to that kind of information. Yes.
All right. Alex, what do you see as the way forward, especially in regards to how social, I don't want to use the word control because that is not going to be possible anyway, but how is this going to be? Because chances are it's not likely to change in terms of people being insensitive. We are becoming a very insensitive society, and not just in Kenya, but world over, by virtue of the fact we are fixed on these gadgets that we have. We're no longer a social society. We socialize on, you know, on a digital platform. So what do you see as the way forward in regards to ensuring that the news that goes out there, we self-regulate, we ensure that we are not polarized just because somebody has given us their view and it is, you know, something that we do not identify with, but we'll tear them down because, again, there's no, you know, face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, you know, communication in itself is wholesomeness. It involves not just words, it involves speech, it involves body language. And one of the dangers, now let's talk of the dangers this new communication platform has brought to us, it has made us walk around in a battle. Like Carol has said, we are walking around with the same friends wherever we go. If you ask yourself, and I keep asking people, how many friends do you have? And then some of them quickly tell me they are not on their social media. And I say, no, I mean, who are your friends? Very few have more than 4. The one I've seen the maximum is 5. So I realize, first of all, these platforms have done is that they have, in what in civil society called bastardized the word friend, and they have made us crave for followers because we are always looking for fame and glory and, you know, all these things we are looking for them are get them online if we can't get them in real life. So what we need to watch out are the harms of the influence of the social media in our social behavior and interaction. Walking around with the same people from home when you are in the vehicle up to the office and when you are out on a restaurant and not seeing the food that is beautiful and smells so good on the table and then the restaurant you are in, you are losing out life. So therefore, even the news you are getting from the same sources, reinforcing your own biases, is a danger. Maybe, to answer more specifically to your question, is we probably need more of these qualified journalists who now are going to help us burst this bubble by maybe on your news site, because you are more experienced, you provide us alongside those AIs and the bots Carol is talking about that are giving us only that which we want, headlines of this stuff you really don't want to read. This is not meant for you. And probably using the stray star effect, we might get curious why I'm not supposed to read this, and then you give us the things that we don't want to read, the things that are not in our taste. You normalize us into society because we need to be socialized. Left alone, we are going to be little bubbles that will go into smaller chunks and eventually into individuals, and we are going to be very lonely individuals worldwide.
Okay.
Now, that's what I think.
All right. Let me come to you, Sarah. And of course, some of these challenges we are highlighting give us the need for professional journalists or journalists to remain professional. I think that's what I want to say. And maybe just speak to the fact that there's still that space for authentic news. There's still that space for verifying. There's still that space for having accounts that have been verified and over time have built confidence in those who use them to ensure that they give us now what we'd call not fake news.
Yeah, you know, there is. And the reason TV is not going to die or media houses are not going to die is because consumers want information, but they want credible information. Want to be able to know this is an authentic piece of information. There's a reason in Kenya why when you hear political news, you go to certain channels and you're sure this is the real story. And then you watch some stations and you're like, I'm not sure whether it's a real story or it's been created to fit to a certain political agenda. In the US, the same thing you've been able to see. There are some stations that you know the agenda is, this is the agenda they're pushing. And I think that is what has become the bad thing of media houses, is because we perceive them to always have an agenda that is linked to either one political side or one story, one agenda, whether political or not. And I think the role of media houses is to ensure they keep the trust consumers have of them. So if I watch KTN News and I hear something on KTN News, then I'm sure it's the truth, it's factual, it's been checked. If I see something on Twitter, I know I could always go back to the KTN News handle and be able to get what the real story actually is, as opposed to being confused whether maybe KTN tweeted the wrong thing or not. So the onus is on journalists, on media houses to create a perception that drives trust with consumers. I don't think it's really bad or way down in the hole, but I think it's very important to ensure every piece of information, you've checked it, so you don't have spaces where you have to apologize for publishing something wrong, because every time you apologize, you chip off the trust.
Right.
And one day, you know, the consumer does not really believe that this is the truth of the matter. People need to believe the paper as much as they believe the news channel, as much as they believe the Twitter feed. Your Twitter feed should be as believable as the paper.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, Carol, since you're in the digital space and you do that for a living literally every day, help us, you know, how does one identify fake accounts? Because one of the things that does with fake news is that somebody can create a pseudo account for whatever reason and send out information, and that now becomes, oh, KTN News tweeted this. Yes, yet maybe it may not be KTN News that did that, it just might be but how does one go about identifying so that you also protect yourself?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And we've seen, let me use the case of BBC and the video from Cameroon that showed some soldiers killing some two mothers and their children. There are ways to find out whether some information is true or false. So back to the issue of Twitter handles, it's just going and finding out, first of all, the number of followers, because you see bots these days that they are so aggressive, pushing a certain agenda, and just seeing the thread. When was the account created? Who are the friends to this to that account? What information? If there are images, just download the images and even do a simple Google reverse search. Because they can be claiming this accident happened or this personality has killed somebody. Just spend some time, 5 minutes, searching the image. With Google Maps, I can even tell you where you are, the street. That's how sophisticated we are, that she can take a picture at the Taj Mahal with her hands up, and with Google Maps and Google Streets, I can even tell you where she was standing, because I can look at the sizes of the tree, I can look at the coordinates, because right now, if we search Taj Mahal, we can actually see the people who are visiting it right now. So if she was there, you know, you can sort of see. So
there are ways to verify.
There are many ways to verify, only that we need media literacy. Personalities like yourself, we find a lot of fake accounts being created. And you know, you go there and say how you won 20 million jackpot, with some betting company, or you accuse or you attack another media personality and people think it's you. And of course it's picked by the bloggers, and because you're in studio and you're not picking your phone, people assume it's true. By the time you're done with the morning show,
there's a whole lot
there's a
happening
whole fire.
out
Your
there.
mother is calling you to find out
what is going on.
whether you need prayers, you know.
Yeah.
So it can be very, very dangerous.
Okay.
It can actually be a matter of
All
life
right.
and death.
Let me bring in Alex. And Alex, I need your closing comments and maybe just a word of advice to consumers of these media platforms, because they can either build or they can damage. Maybe your closing comments and just advice, Alex.
Yeah, as far as consumers, I would say is that they need you and the people who have experience to package your news in a captivating way. This will probably attract them away from the avalanche of online information, some of it fake, untrue, alternative facts, etc. So you still have more responsibility than before to make sure that your facts are checked. And then you also give us information that is legally checked, so you don't land us into trouble for forwarding a link which is legitimately obtained from your site, not the fake site website. Then I would also say that perhaps you should be able to summarize each and every news article, news piece into 150 words, capturing its news essence, and that will help to determine how interesting it is. And then we can read more, we can watch more, we can wait for it. That way we are going to gain trust, more confidence, and we'll be tuning into the news from a particular channel, and then you use media to augment that. And then finally, create an army. I would want to go the analog way on this. Create an army of human fact checkers who are now the trusted ones who can actually tell you, hey, I have a problem with this, and then they flag those things, and then you look into them, and then you can pull them down because you know those people. When they say something, it should mean something.
All right, thank you very much, Alex, for joining us this morning on phone. Sarah, your closing comments and maybe just a word of advice.
You know, I think in the future we are going to see much more pressure from consumers wanting more content. And the only thing we can do is demand better from ourselves, demand better from the media houses, demand better from each other. And if we demand better from media houses, then they are forced to actually work harder to deliver better. I think Facebook was put at task in the US after the elections to really explain what happened. And a lot went wrong. And the fact that they had to actually go and explain this to the Congress, it means they had to, as a company, think in the future, how do we ensure this does not happen? And if we demand this from platforms and demand this from media houses as consumers, then we'll get into a place whereby we are going to regulate ourselves. But if we don't, then we'll continue spiraling into
that. Carol, your closing comments.
I think technology plays a key role right now, and if used well, we can do good things with it. You know, we can share good information, we can solve problems. We shouldn't use it to always attack and fight and gossip. But I think also as media houses, we need to set the agenda on, you know, disinformation, misinformation, fact-checking, and of course, if you are wrong, correcting whatever misinformation that has gone out. But I think if we use the mediums well, I think we can bring up a good generation that is very, very informed, not seeing things from one type of lens.
Perspective.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. We'll have to wind up there because of time. Carol Kimutai, Managing Editor, Standard Digital, Sarah Katusia, MD, Mediacom, and Wavemaker, and Alex, who had also joined us on phone. It is now 18 minutes to 8 o'clock, and we're going to take a short break, but still to come, we have your health that is lined up for you, and today we'll be looking at teen health, amongst other things. We'll also be looking at other stories that are making headlines. So for now, we take that break, but do stay with us right here on KTN News. We'll be right back.